fortunate today and to have a very unique array of the investment life cycle for a company. We have very early seed stage company representation. We have early stage, we have expansion stage, and later stage. So I think we're going to bring a rather unique perspective to the life cycle for web-based, internet-based, communication-based technology.
You know, we all started investing in the web 10 to 15 years ago, and we saw it as a shooting star. All of a sudden, explosive new markets and opportunities, and that did come to pass in a number of industries and in our all-time spectacular returns in our industry. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people felt it went poof as the aspirations of huge revenue across hundreds of companies wasn't allowable by the market, and so the perception is tremendous fallback. And yet today there's probably more companies being formed than even in the boom period, but instead of taking 20, 30, or $50 million, we're seeing them formed with $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million. And a lot of the basics of venture capital have come back relative to capital efficiency and time frames and building a company the old-fashioned way. So in some ways, it's a return to basics or where we were before, yet a whole lot more market and business opportunities because the Web 2.0 makes it a lot simpler to integrate and to operate in both in a small and a worldwide fashion.
Software as a service is how customers want to buy. They don't want to put the big CapEx out. They want to buy software that is a light footprint. They don't have a lot of installations or upkeep or maintenance. And they want to put the vendor or the ISV, the company that we might help fund, they want them to earn their keep every month, every quarter, every year. And so, the good news is that, now 10 years after sort of the ASP wave of the internet boom, folks understand that model, understand the values that it brings, and appreciate the power of that model as they move forward. And on the flip side, the companies are rewarded with high multiples for that compared to the average software company that maybe doesn't have recurring revenue.
Something else that I'm a big believer in is begin with the end in mind. And what I mean by that philosophy is have an idea of not just what you're trying to do for your given markets and what products and services, but where do you want to be with your company? Do you want to be the next Facebook, or do you want to? Are you okay building up a technology company, Web 2 or whatever the case may be, that exits in 2 years for $25 million? Because those two scenarios drive very different behaviors in what you're going to do as you go along. Some of the fundamentals don't, as far as building a good product, a good customer base, but what your expectations are for you and, more importantly, your investors are now set. So you can start planning for that and start managing your business to that. And so there's no surprises, which I think is...
John, do you think that the entrepreneurs or the companies that are being brought to get a sense that it is going back to basics, or do you think they're still... Because my perception was the same as yours. In the past, there was a lot of these high flyers, quick hits, high aspirations for leverage. Do you think
the American entrepreneur is the most adaptable, cat out there? So, if there isn't a lot of money, they're going to find a strategy without that, and they also recognize that they've got to attract customers and have an innovative product and those sorts of things. So, certainly, the untold story in all this recession and financial mess we're in is the dedication and focus and unbelievable commitment by so many entrepreneurs, and those who are successful are paying off with Web 2.0 technology companies. Scores of them being successful.
As John said, the lifeblood is the entrepreneur. They have to make it happen every day. The role of an ICG or any of these great investors I'm up here with is really to be a service to help build those great companies. There's always, at 8 or 10 million, you're not complete. There's things to do better. There's things to scale. There's management team members usually to bring in. And our job is to help the entrepreneur make those tough decisions and continue to bring their idea and build a great company.
You don't know what's under the next rock or around the next corner. So the only way to get exposure is to let people know you exist and what you do, and then opportunities come to you. And that's the only way you can really exploit what you have.
But there's a lot of resources around Philadelphia right now. Entrepreneurs are talking and working with each other. A lot of, working very in the basement and in the garage and working together and getting to a place where there's some sort of proof of concept. There's more people around now that you can have as sitting on a board or sitting as advisors that have been with successful companies, and all of that starts to create the energy that we're looking for. It doesn't have to be a revenue-generating company, but we do want to see something. Either it's going to be a star management team, and then you can be a little earlier, or it's going to have a little revenue traction, and maybe it can be a younger team, or it's going to have some sort of sustainable competitive advantage, whether that be a great Rolodex because people are coming from the industry and they really know the problem of the industry. So there are a variety of different things. We're still getting in earlier than most of the other investors, but there still does have to be a little bit of bootstrapping to make some traction.
You could have something that is really adaptable and have a strong need, but make sure you understand the business model behind it. And specifically, an example, I've seen some companies that are depending on ad revenue, okay? And that's going to exist, okay? There's no doubt about it. It will continue, but it's eroding pretty quickly. So you better understand that. And I can't tell you how many business plans say, well, here are the numbers from 2009 on what if you know what a CPM is, right? And you go, okay, well, do you realize that number's half of that right now, and it's going to be half again in a year. So if you're building a business model with this many users and this much revenue, and therefore needs this much cash, you need to be really careful. And I've seen companies get shortchanged because they went down that path. And not that their product didn't have value, not that it wasn't being adopted by lots of users, just they had misforecasted their business model.
There's certainly plenty of people who think the software or IT industry's day is past and it's too mature, and I think about that about once a year, and then I realize we have hundreds of opportunities in front of us of new things to automate, and I lose that thought. And so the issue is, have you found something unique, and do you have a solution that a lot of people have to have? And Web 2.0 technology and others is less a technology solution. It's a way to deliver your domain expertise to solve problems and to do it in not having to do it in a customized way.
I would say that, my experience, some of the best connectors are like our sponsors here. They actually know a broad selection of folks who both are board members and proven successful business folks as well as VCs. And so I would turn you to your service providers as being a great sounding board and who've built business models of finding that entrepreneur and helping them as they go through the various stages as a great place to start.
But I think that there's two key things that have changed. One is that, and I think this was brought up in the earlier panel, that the cost to start an internet startup has dropped so significantly. You don't have to buy the hardware anymore. The hosting's literally dollars a month. You can there's all sorts of libraries. You can cobble together a lot of open source things. So one of the things we talk about a lot at DreamIt, and again we heard it a little earlier, is that instead of spending a lot of time planning and doing all this other activity, just build something quickly, get a prototype out there, get some feedback from people. And the nice thing is that you can put a prototype, you can throw up a website, you can do all that in a series of weekends or evenings or over the course of a couple of months just to get a sense of what the market is and to get a sense of whether people have any interest or not. And years ago, you'd have to start with hundreds of thousands of dollars or more to even be able to figure out whether you have something worth pursuing.
So now that you've got the cloud and 2.0 and all of the different ways that people are interacting with forums and social networking, it has broadened our ability to not only market but also just that penetration, because our clients before didn't understand what that was. So it was all self-contained within a building or within departments or within zones, and they were still having to do a lot of things within the limitations of what we now have. So what that did for us was it really excelled and accelerated our ability to reach the masses simultaneously. And for what we do in our space, that is the value. Otherwise, there's no real advantage or cost savings to our solution. So for us, it was huge.
So it's not just let me raise $3 million and I'll be successful. No, it's let me find good customers, let me find good employees, and then figure out my business model and pivot and figure out that, my customer says, no, Phil, that's not what I want. Those are the hard discussions you got to have. You find yeses by finding nos, right? I'm a huge believer, and the way you get to yes is finding all the nos. And so somebody alluded to that in the other panel, which is, hey, if you find 100 nos, that's just on your path to finding yeses. Again, I think that co-working is part of a larger trend, which is just the power of peer group. For most co-working spaces, it's peer groups of freelancers, right? DreamIt is a peer group. It's a peer group of startup entrepreneurs together with people who can support them and an ecosystem around it. But Philly Startup Leaders, our whole mantra is that more than anything else, startup entrepreneurs need each other, right? More than they need investors, anything else. And everything we've done has sort of proven that point. And so I think that putting peers in the same place, especially entrepreneurs, is incredibly powerful. And the more you can do that, the better.
But I mean, to do a startup, you have to be incredibly resilient, and you have to be, one of the things when we look through the applications coming in, because we get hundreds of applications for our 10 or 15 slots, one of the questions I always try to ascertain when I'm talking to the entrepreneurs is, how crushed are they going to be if this fails? If I think that at the end of the 3 or 4 months it's going to be, oh, well, I'll go back and do this, or I'll go back to school, or I'll do this, I mean, that's okay, and maybe there are situations where that works. But I really want the people to put their soul into this and to make it something that they are going to put, every inch of living being, and they're going to be there on weekends, and they're going to be there in evenings. And, there's some interesting things that folks write. I think Seth Godin writes about a trough, I forget what he calls it, that every company tends to go through. The dip. And you have to have the tenacity to work your way through it, because you get lots of little dips and you get lots of big dips. And what you don't want is an entrepreneur that the first time they hit a dip or the second time they hit a dip are just going to throw their hands up and say it's too hard. And I think, you want the great idea, you want somebody who's really smart and all those other things, but I think at the end of the day, the entrepreneur that's really tenacious is just going to figure it out and find a way. I think that's the most important trait.
For young startup companies, I would say you kind of have to do it all. I think you involve yourself in groups. I think you talk to as many people as you possibly can to garnish their experience. I think you talk to your friends and family, but I think you also talk to the gentleman, or like the gentleman that we had on the first panel, that I've seen it, have lived it, who go to bed thinking about it and wake up thinking about it, and I think they'll lead you in the right direction.